Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Authors on the Air. I'm your host, James Latwell, and this is part of the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. And we're lucky to have with us today two really, really good authors, Jeff Wilson and Brian Andrews. And the new book is Tom Clancy's The Defense Protocol. You guys knocked it out of the park with this one. I got to just lead off with that. It was tremendous, man.
Well, your check's in the mail. Thanks for that. You know what? It's I really do appreciate it. I know we both do, but I got to tell you, it's such a joy to write in this universe, having grown up in that universe, that I think it makes it easy. Yeah, it's a little overwhelming, the idea of it. It's this strain of having to live up to the universe that he created is a real thing. But once you get in, and as a writer, you get it. Once you're in that universe and the story, what a joy. Tom created such an amazing universe that to be able to play in that sandbox, it's just a thrill. So it's fun.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it right out. We all kind of grew up with these stories, but you guys have managed to make it contemporary and current. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. But why don't you, Brian? Why don't you tell us a little bit about what the story is in Defense Protocol?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's sort of the mandate that we gave ourselves, Jim, is like, okay. And I think you probably heard us talk about this when we were doing the Act of Defiance press tours. Act of Defiance was sort of our opportunity to do like a Top Gun Maverick, what they did in film for Top Gun. We did that in print with Act of Defiance. 40 years later, we have an opportunity where, we've come full circle with Russia. And so now we're back to, blue on blue, deep water submarine actions. It was a great opportunity to have new geopolitical stakes with new technology. And so that was Act of Defiance. And I think that really gave us the confidence in Defense Protocol to say, okay, well, that was our love letter to Tom Clancy and Hunt for Red October. Let's do something that has maybe some echoes of Cardinal in the Kremlin, but we'll go over to the Pacific theater. We'll look at one of the biggest geopolitical potential tinderbox situations, which is the reunification of Taiwan. And China has been saber rattling about this for a couple decades. They've made no secret, sort of laying the groundwork for this idea that it's not if, it's when will Taiwan be reunified. They've made it clear that they believe it's part of China and it needs to come back in the fold. But it's not an easy thing to do, right, Jeff? Like, it's not just turn a switch and it can be done.
Yeah, no, it's there's a lot of nuance to it. I think that's sort of the key to it is you gotta get that layer deeper, and there's a lot of complexity to these things. And that's why Tom Clancy launched this genre, because he had such an incredible ability to not just represent military and intelligence communities in a way that was gripping and real and made you feel like you were looking behind a curtain for the first time ever. Obviously, that was a powerful gift. But he also had a gift for seeing the nuance in the geopolitical landscape. And so as authors writing in that universe, you feel a tremendous amount of pressure to honor that and try to reflect it in the work that you take on. And so Taiwan, that's a perfect opportunity, right? Because the military aspects of it are fascinating and exciting, but there's so many layers beyond that, which is why they haven't made that move yet. Yes, they want to do it. Okay, well, do it, right? It's literally militarily, it's minutes from their mainland shore to Taiwan. If they wanted to make an aggressive, bold move, they could do it and be successful. But that's where the Clancy universe would object to making it that simple. You can make a really cool military book, but what about the geopolitics? What about the economic impact? And that's where, because we live in a global community, that's where China is kept in check. It's not, will they respond militarily or won't they? It's, will Europe stop buying things? Will there be an embargo? Will there be boycotts? Will there be tariffs that would devastate the Chinese economy? And then on the other side of that coin, do I have the ability economically to impose those tariffs and embargoes and stuff, because we're so, as a planet, dependent on so much of their commerce? So we tried to put those elements in there because to not would be not to honor Tom Clancy in the way he wrote.
Yeah, and you did it. You guys did a tremendous job doing that because it's weaved in through the entire book, and like Clancy, you know, military technical thrillers, geopolitical thrillers, but you guys have a way of telling the real story, the thriller underneath of that, without getting bogged down in some of that technical, jargon and the whiz bang stuff that is out there. I mean, kudos to you guys because that's hard to do because you've got the spotlight on everything else, but the story comes through in here. So how much do you think about that as you're putting this kind of Clancy universe story together?
A lot, actually, because the Clancy fans do expect to learn. But what we've said, and this is true in our Tier 1 series and Sons of all the series we write, this is something that Brian and I have been highly intentional about from day one. And that is, we appreciate that readers love to learn, but oh, do they hate to be taught. And so the moment that you feel like you're being taught in your thriller novel, you're pulling the ejection handles. And so it is a dance. It's a delicate ballet to be able to share the technology in a meaningful way, to share the geopolitics and the tactics and strategy in a way that feels organic. And so when it comes to the technology, and acronyms being a great example, we want the dialogue to be natural and normal for what those people would say and not over-explain things. But that then bogs you down in some words that your average reader may not be familiar with. And so what Brian and I decided from the very beginning is we solve that problem in context. Yes, I've never heard that acronym and I don't know what it stands for, but in the context of this conversation and what the threat is, I kind of know exactly what they're doing. And so by doing it that way, you don't pull the reader out of the story. In fact, you press them more into the story. They actually maybe feel like they're standing in the CIC, listening to this conversation and figuring out what's going on in real time. And so and from your writing, it's a struggle and a challenge, but if you're highly intentional about it, you can find that balance. Maybe sometimes in edits, but you eventually find it.
But you find
and if you think back, I remember my very first day showing up on the USS Louisville as a young ensign, never been on a submarine before. And it's not a situation where, you're met at the pier and someone holds your hand and they're going to take you around and say, this is what this machine does. And this is what this machine does. And here's your map and here's how you get around. And here's what you need to do. Here's your schedule. Here's your itinerary for the day. That's not how it works. It's a very busy, very, very, very busy place, very busy platform. Everyone has jobs to do. They're behind. They're under pressure. They don't have time for baggage, right? They don't have time to hold people's hands. And so we sort of said, you know what? That's what it's really like when you show up at a command is they throw you in. You got to tread water until you really figure out the system and can be a contributing member of the crew. And our readers are smart. I think a lot of times authors assume maybe too little of their readers, don't give their readers enough credit. And so we said, you know what? It's okay for Katie Ryan to show up and be on this destroyer, and she's never been on CIC before, but they're not going to slow down and explain everything to her so she can catch up. So now, as the reader, you're in Katie's shoes. It's new for her. It's new for you. If she can handle it, so can you. And so that's how we respect the reader and take them through. So I love what Jeff was saying about context because that's the key, right? It is all about the context and being immersed in the situation. And the smart, savvy reader will appreciate that we give them enough respect that they can hang with us in the story.
No, that's really well said. And like you just to use this example, when Katie shows up in that destroyer, totally new environment for her, and you can feel the anxiety, on the page as she's going through that. So it's there. You did a great job. Now the Jack Ryan character, I mean, and Jeff, you mentioned, we kind of grew up with this, from Hunt for the Red October on, but how has that character really evolved over time? And what did you have to go through to think about that character in this iteration of Defense Protocol? Because he's in a very different world now.
Yeah. So when you come into a legacy series like this, you you accept the burden of all that's come before you, but also the responsibility of that canon of work, right? So with Jack Ryan, we have a guy who in Hunt for the Red October was a 26 or 7-year-old analyst at the CIA. And now he's the president of the United States, and he's evolved over decades and 25 books, right? This is the 25th novel in the series. And so you buy into that. He's the president. The limitation for Jack Ryan for us is we really did want to return the series to that vibe that Clancy had originally of big military, geopolitic, fish out of water. Like I've always loved Jack Ryan, but that early Jack Ryan, when he was, I'm just an analyst, like the strain and stress of that, the emotion of that was very, very powerful. And so we set out to reproduce that, but how? Because Jack Ryan's the president. He's not going to fast rope onto the deck of a moving submarine, right? And so that's where Katie came in for us. That was sort of our light bulb moment. Our epiphany was we can reproduce that and bring the nostalgia of that vibe back to the series through Katie, who doesn't even know she's walking in her father's footsteps, right? Like she was a little tiny kid, 6 years old when some of these things happened. And now she's a Naval Academy graduate and working in ONI. She doesn't remember her dad as much other than a senior leader at CIA and then the president. So she's completely unaware that she is our Jack Ryan analog because she doesn't see her dad that way. But the readers that have been on this journey forever since Hunt, I think do see it. They do see it and they do enjoy it. And for us, we're able to see another side of Jack, not just Jack, the president and the cow or the Boy Scout that always does the right thing, but now he's got the complexity of his daughter. And we're both dads of daughters. And I can imagine what that would feel like. So fleshing that relationship out gave us a new layer of Jack to develop, because after 25 books, he's been pretty well written, right? We all sort of know who Jack is. And so finding a new layer to explore was a challenge. And that's sort of how we approached it.
Yeah, no, it's great. And what I think folks will appreciate, you don't have to have read the prior books in the series to get into that story with Katie and even Jack as the president. So it's a perfect, if people want to just pick up this one as a standalone, it works. I mean, everything's there. Brian, and Jeff talked about it a little bit. Writing a legacy series is difficult. I mean, you've had this laundry list of noted authors, before you in the series, Grant Blackwood, Mark Graney, Mark Cameron, Don Bentley. How do you pick up that mantle and move it forward, and yet you still have your own voice to it, and it rings true?
Yeah, I think the first step and most important is that you have to be a fan of the series, and we are. I mean, we're fanboys from day one. Hunt for Red October helped inspire and motivate us to join the Navy. So if you're not a fan and your heart's not in it, I don't think you're going to deliver a good product. I also think you have to be sort of ravenous about this idea that, you want to deliver a good story, right? So when we both became authors, we've talked about this before, before you're an author, you're a reader. And when you think about storytelling, you can remember those books that you read in the past. When you finish that book, you're like, damn, that was a good story. And you think about it after, and you wish you could go back and be in it again. And a lot of times it makes you go back and read it again. And so that's the sort of experience that we want to deliver to the Clancy fans, because we are Clancy fans. And so I think you have to be a little bit fearless when you go into this and say, you know what, we're just going to freaking go for it. And you have to you have to shed that, okay, well, I'm going to piss some people off and I might not get this right. And if you bog yourself down with what ifs and, oh, this might offend somebody, or this might be wrong, or what about this? I think you'll never get the book done, right? So what we did is we said, all right, we've got Tom Colgan, who's sort of the guardrails. He's the subject matter expert. He's been continuity from the very beginning, but from when Clancy was writing solo to bringing on Greeny, through Cameron, all the way through us, Tom Colgan has been there. So he's our safety net. He's our guardrails. He's going to catch us if we really mess up. But other than that, We're going to do an Andrews and Wilson badass story with geopolitics and all the things that we try to do best. And if people don't like it, at least we can say we did our damnedest, right, to deliver a good story. And that was our approach.
No, I love it. And you guys did deliver a story, but let's dive in a little bit deeper here. I mean, as a co-writing team, I mean, you've read other co-written works, and some of them, quite honestly, you can tell who wrote what in the book. You guys managed to deliver a very seamless product here that I couldn't pick out which voice was which. So how did you kind of mix that stew together to make it so it sounds so seamless?
So every co-author team has their own style, and what works for them and probably for no one else. And we're no exception. And so what we do is a little bit different, a little bit weird, but it does allow us to do exactly what you've said. So, you need to understand that not just from an efficiency standpoint, but just from the fact that we're both in-story writers. In other words, we have to be in the universe to deliver. We have to both be writing a little bit of everything. And so the way we do it is we divide everything up by point of view in Act 1, 2, and 3. We swap them around a little bit as we go, but we're writing simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
And because we're able to sort of take the ego out of the equation, maybe because of the military DNA, we're so used to team and mission being more important than self that there really is no ego in our process. So every time I write a chapter, I send it to Brian. And the very first thing he does is he completely rewrites that chapter, start to finish. He doesn't have to call me. He doesn't have to ask. He changes anything he wants. Then he sends it back. I see what he's done. It goes in the master file, and vice versa. He sends me his and I do the exact same thing. So for one thing, it's very efficient. For another thing, that technique allows us to both keep the story moving along and be in the other guy's mind. But I think the byproduct of that is what you've said. It is one voice because it's our voice, because we've both had a touch on every word in every paragraph in every chapter. And there are times, this sounds like something you make up for an interview, but it's true. There have been times where when the book is done, one of our wives or a fan or whatever will say, "Oh, chapter 37, that was you, right?" And I don't remember. I literally am not, I know I wrote part of it. I know I either rewrote it or wrote it, but I can't literally remember whether I did the first draft of that or not. So I think that's been the secret to be able to achieve that voice that you're talking about.
Wow, great. Yeah, we really appreciate that too. Now, just for each of you, which was the most difficult character for you to write in this in Defense Protocol?
Well, I think that Jack Ryan is the most challenging character to write. There are several. Jeff mentioned this before, that he's president, so he is sort of hemmed in by the fact that he's, his set pieces are the Oval Office, the Situation Room, the White House for the most part, right? But he's also sort of hemmed in because he has. And this is the great thing about him. He has a very strong moral compass. Tom Cogan will describe him as the ultimate Boy Scout. And so he goes into every fight with one arm tied behind his back. And so it's a challenge to make him be able to, be tactical and persevere in a way that's realistic when you're fighting against an enemy that has no such constraints. And how do we make him not boring too, right? Because sometimes, I think that was sort of the whole thing with Marvel. I got to give Marvel, like a shout out for how they managed Captain America, because he was always the most boring Avenger, right? Because he was so goody two shoes, and somehow they found a way to make heroism quite exciting and seem quite noble, and that's what Jack is. But you have to somehow do it in a way that seems realistic and doesn't seem like he's like an unattainable standard. So we spent a lot of time talking about Jack and how do you write him and how do you make him interesting and how do we give him moral crises in every book and show the way to the office. And obviously neither one of us have been president of the United States. So there is a bit of us trying to imagine what that would be like. So for me, I'd say that's the most challenging.
Yeah. I have nothing to add. Like he's the most challenging. He also is there's the burden of knowing that he's been in every book, right? So there's a lot to know about him, but also there's very little that is unexplored. And so, like Brian said, finding something new, and that's what Katie did for us, was allow us to show that side of him, that father-daughter relationship, and explore that element. You know, he always wants to do the right thing, but it's a little different when your baby girl is out there in harm's way, with a pointy tip. And so that gave us a little bit of an opportunity to explore a different side of him. But yeah, for all the reasons Brian said, I agree. He's probably the most challenging, but also the most fun for some of the same reasons.
Yeah, I could see that. We're going to end up with something we call 3 quick hits. And I want to put each of you in one of your characters' heads. Jeff, why don't you take Katie, and Brian take Jack, and just answer these 3 quick questions here. What is that character's favorite drink? What's their cocktail of choice?
Katie is mostly a Chardonnay person, but if she's really feeling crazy, she might have a martini.
Brian, what about
Jack's going to have a glass of Cabernet Sauvignon. And then if he's going to let his hair down, it's going to be a bottle of beer.
And if they're together, they're having a beer.
Yeah.
Yes, they do. How about their favorite music? What do they listen to?
I think that Katie is pretty eclectic. If you look at the Katie character, she's got so much complexity to her because of the way she was raised. So to me, if I had to answer that question, it would be, she likes a little bit of everything. She probably listens to jazz. She probably listens to pop. She has some favorite country artists. There's a little bit of everything in her because she's such an eclectic character.
I think Jack doesn't have time to listen to music. But if he does, he probably goes back to, like, this is what happens to people when they get older, is they just go back to the stuff they listened to when they were younger, right? So he's probably listening to Fleetwood Mac or, you know, the Rolling Stones or something like that when he's trying to recapture that youth. Yeah,
makes sense. And then finally, what is their greatest fear? Jeff, we'll start with Katie.
I think Katie's greatest fear is failure. Not because she's afraid to fail and not promote and not advance, but for her, she would only measure failure as letting those around her down, whether it's her country and all the people there, her team, her dad. I think that's what haunts Katie more than physical danger.
Got it.
And I think this is my favorite question that we've been asked on our interviews, because no one's asked this question about Jack. And it's so important, right? I think he's afraid that his own hubris would cause him to make a mistake that would bring down the nation that he loves. He puts so much weight on his shoulders to keep America strong and noble, and that maybe he misses something, or maybe from his own ego, he actually fails to do that, to be that protector, that safeguard, that pillar of support that holds up the nation.
Yeah, no, that perfectly sums him up. Folks, we've been talking with Brian Andrews and Jeff Wilson on their new book, Defense Protocol. Just out this week, December 3rd came out. And, congratulations, guys. You really did a great job. And thanks for spending some time with us here today.
Thanks for having us, man. Had a great time.
Yeah, great interview.
We'll see you again soon. Take care, guys.
See ya.